I'm really happy to have Cynthia Albright with us today for our photo gear and beer series.
Gear and beer, or is there beer?
Well, I had a Bloody Mary, and we are at a brewery. And on that note, I would like to thank Schussboom for having us here today. They have an awesome spot, great food, great beer. Um, but yeah, let's get into it. So, Cynthia, what? Tell me about photography. What?
My photography journey.
Yeah, your journey. Yeah, you come quite a long way since we started here.
I started with my passion for photography in high school.
Mm.
Um, like most kids, we had a photography elective,
Mhm.
and Mr. King was our teacher. And we were black and white and taking film and processing in school, and it was awesome. And I remember capturing the only picture that I really remember capturing was of an outdoor scene, and there was an arc like a rainbow of light,
Mm.
and it had this profusion of light extending from the arc. And I remember Mr. King saying, "How in the world did that even happen?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "I don't even know." But he hung it up in the classroom, and that was a really nice inspiration for me.
Yeah.
But over the years, I shot with Minolta for years and years. It was family photography, vacations, Christmas, those kinds of things. And
Sure.
then when you guys took over, well, I mean, we used to go to the original camera store in town for, different things. But I really became interested in photography when sort of action camera came on the scene. And I came in and decided I was going to really sort of up my interest, if you will. I wouldn't even say up my game yet because I'm not even there and I'm still not there. But
Yeah.
I upped my interest and I bought that D850 and I started shooting wildlife with that D850, and then decided that I needed to be in that mirrorless game that you wanted to get me into at 18 months earlier, and bought this Z9 from you. And I've since bought a Z8. And my passion is really just outdoor wildlife photography,
Yeah.
not landscapes, but wildlife.
Okay.
And I really enjoy the opportunity to just be outside and connect with those animals,
Yeah.
those birds, anything that's out there. I love macro photography too,
Mhm.
but I just enjoy being outside. Gives me an opportunity since I work inside.
Right.
Gives me an opportunity, reason to be outside.
Yeah. Which is awesome. I've seen a couple of your photos, and we talked briefly before this interview started. You say that you're the only person that sees your work.
Well, I do post it on social media
Okay.
a little bit. I just don't want to make the reason why I take pictures to put them out there.
Yeah.
So on occasion, I'll post a birding of Nevada.
Hmm.
Um, in the winter time, the birds of prey are really prevalent,
Yeah.
and they're particularly prevalent down in Washoe Valley.
Hmm.
So I like to go down there and just see what's flying about and
Yep.
jump out of the car, which usually when I pull up, they see me and then they take off.
Right.
But that happens with birding.
You had come in I think a couple of weeks ago, and you were describing a scenario. I think you said you were in Washoe Valley and you were trying to photograph an eagle, and you went out, you got out of your car, and you stood there for quite some time
Oh my
hoping.
goodness. Yes. No, I think it was the day after Christmas. I drove down to Washoe Valley. We had fresh snow
Yeah.
down there. At least the mountain on the East Lake was covered in snow. And there's an old snag at mile 13 off 395. And so when you get off at Bellevue, you hang a U and you come back up, there was two owls. There was two owls there. And so I parked, and that old snag is a long way from the road.
Yeah.
But I walked down to the fence line, and I had my 800, and I put my camera lens on the top of one of those stakes, just rested it there. I was prepared for the cold, but I wasn't prepared to stand there for that long. I was in sneakers, I had no gloves, I had a coat, no hat, and I waited for an hour. My feet were soaked. I couldn't feel my hands, literally, because I was holding the shutter button release halfway down and the autofocus. And both of those eagles, one of them just sat there, which I thought he was on the lower limb. I thought he was going to fly because he actually took two different times to release himself. So usually they do that and then they fly.
Right.
But he did not do that. So he just kept turning around and looking at me and then looking out to the west, excuse me, to the east. And then because there was two, one flew away. I didn't even see him fly away.
Mm.
So I missed that.
Yeah.
And then I caught him coming back in, which was really nice.
Mhm.
But I waited so long that I was shouting at him, yelling, caw, caw, caw. I was saying anything I could to get that one eagle to fly. Because I was focused on him because I knew he would just do one of these,
Yeah.
but he never did anything.
Mm.
And so I gave up
Yeah.
and drove home. But I did happen to get a beautiful Cooper's hawk flying right at me
Yeah.
in a tree off a neighborhood that was just off of Bellevue that
Okay.
same day. So it was a rewarding day,
Yeah.
but I really wanted the eagle,
Yeah.
the bald eagle. I mean, everybody loves
Everybody
the bald
wants
eagle.
the eagle. So,
Exactly. Everybody wants the eagle.
I mean, you're obviously very dedicated to this.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I am.
So you travel a lot.
I do.
And you mentioned that you're going to go on a safari trip soon.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, let's see. I traveled. I traveled in 2021 during COVID to Tanzania and Kenya
Mhm.
and Zambia and Rwanda,
Yeah.
where I was able to capture silverback gorillas and lions and cheetahs and leopards and baby lions and elephants, um, rhinoceros. I mean, all the big five.
Yeah.
And that trip really opened my eyes to the need to have much larger lenses,
Sure.
much more powerful equipment.
Yeah.
In fact, I took my D850 on that trip, and when I came home, I bought the Z9. I've since taken a workshop with a photographer that I really like, Lisa Langell.
Mhm.
She's out of Arizona.
She's
In fact, I
awesome.
met her through Action
Yeah.
Camera,
Yeah.
through a birding workshop. And then I went to New Mexico to photograph sandhill cranes in flight,
Mm.
panning
Mm.
in slow motion with her.
Yeah.
And talk about the most difficult thing you could possibly imagine,
Yeah.
which is holding the camera in really low light because they come in the morning.
Sure.
Or excuse me, they come in the morning, but a lot of them spend the night in the water all night so that the coyotes don't get them.
Oh, sure.
And then
Yeah,
they
yeah.
take off in the morning to feed, and then they come back.
Okay.
And you're on a tripod with a gimbal,
Right.
but the goal is to capture them in flight, in focus
Mhm.
with their eye, panning in a really slow shutter speed so that everything behind the bird is blurry
Right.
and the bird is in focus.
Yeah.
It is very difficult.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it.
Mhm.
But it took me 4 days
Yeah.
before I captured one. But
Yeah.
when I captured one, it made up for those huge 4 days where I didn't capture one. But Lisa is a phenomenal teacher and
Yeah.
photographer. And she really helped all of us. There are 6 of us. She really helped all of us capture these magnificent images of these sandhill cranes in flight, these snow geese. I have this photograph that I really love because it's cold. It was in November in New Mexico. And so the foreground is all this dried wheatgrass where the cranes are feeding.
Yeah.
And the background are these mountains with these ominous clouds and this blue sky and these white clouds. And there's this massive takeoff of snow geese,
Mm.
thousands of them. But if you look in the very middle of the photograph, there's one sandhill crane. Just like this.
How
In the
cool.
middle of all these geese.
How cool is that?
Beautiful. It's my
Yeah.
favorite. It's just so beautiful. And then, of course, I have plenty that I captured with the sandhill cranes in focus. But when the crane is in focus and everything behind him is a blur,
Yeah.
you can't even tell that it's just a sea of more sandhill cranes
Right.
because they're all blurred.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting technique.
Mm-hmm.
I also went to Lisa Langell's photography workshop this past year in 2024
Mhm.
in northern Tucson,
Oh.
where we photographed hummingbirds
Yeah.
in an outdoor studio,
Mm-hmm.
shooting hummingbirds at 1/160th of a second.
Oh, wow.
You can't imagine.
Right.
But I mean, we set this all up with this lighting and these feeders
Mhm.
and these flowers, and then we're 10, 12 feet back, and we're just waiting for the birds to come in naturally. And then we just use our plunger,
Yep.
and we're taking photographs, and they're magnificent. We change the backgrounds. So, I mean, it's just really fun.
Yeah.
Then, well, so that was last year. And then I guess later last year too, I went to Botswana for wildlife. And we were both in Botswana in the Okavango Delta, where you would naturally see, we didn't see any cheetahs, but we saw leopards and lions and kills and all sorts of activities that we captured. I came home with 19,000 photographs. I still have to sift through. In fact, every time I drive to Washoe Valley and I come home with more red-tailed hawks or northern harriers or eagles, my husband says I'm not managing my time well. Because he says, "Are you going to go through those 19,000 photos or not?" But then we went to the Chobe River for a week and we were photographing from a boat. And so if you've ever tried to hold up this kind of a lens, holding it up, waiting for something to move or do something spectacular while the boat is tipping in water. I mean, if we had started there, I think I would have been a little discouraged, but we finished there. So it was a 3-week trip, and we actually had the pleasure and luxury of being in a really small helicopter with the doors off. And so there were 2 of us per helicopter, and then we could just hold our lenses and take photographs of the Okavango Delta from above, which was really special.
Yeah.
It's really special.
So that's amazing.
It is
so
amazing.
you've gotten to experience quite a bit on your
yes, on my photographic journey. Yes.
Yeah. Why did you pick Nikon? Just out of curiosity.
I know. I wish I knew that answer, Brian.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess just because I started with a Nikon, probably like one of the first digital cameras that came out. I bought it was a Nikon. That's Gordon's was the camera store at the time, and like a fellow photographer, Dennis, just said, they didn't really try to steer us into do too many different directions. And Nikon was a name brand; they make their own glass, so that's a good reason.
Yep.
But I've just sort of settled there. Yeah. And if I could turn back the clock, I might. I probably would go to Sony. Yeah. But I can't turn back the clock because I'm too invested. Yeah. I mean, I have the 400 and the 800, the 7200, the 135, the 100 to 400, the 35, the 50, the 26, the 1424.
You've got the dream.
I think I might be forgetting one. I counted this morning. I have 11 lenses.
Yeah, you've got the dream kit.
But I have it all.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky and blessed to be able to do that. But no, I think Nikon's been a really good product. I have to admit it's the heavier of the equipment choices, but you just have to keep lifting weights, I guess.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, I mean, you could use this to curl.
Oh well, this is heavier than a barbell.
Yeah, it is. I started with Nikon. My first camera was a Nikon D40. I got it for my 14th birthday.
Oh wow!
So that's kind of where I started.
But that's not where you are now.
I have a Nikon. I have a Nikon ZF. I do have a couple of Panasonic S5 IIs and a Leica M10 because a lot of what I do is street photography. So kind of a different realm of photography. And going back to what you said earlier about how difficult and challenging it can be, I've tried to do bird photography, and it is incredibly challenging. It's a very different dynamic.
Yes.
So it's really cool to see because I have seen a little bit of your work. It's really cool to see what you're able to do, and you do it very well.
Well,
so I look forward to seeing more photos. I'd like you to eventually sift through those 19,000. Maybe show at least a couple of them.
Well, I mean, we sat on this. There was a dead Cape buffalo that some crocodiles had dragged into the Chobe. Yeah. And its body was resting on the bottom, on the sand of the Chobe River. And we sat on, like, perpendicular to the island and to this Cape buffalo, where his upper 1/3 of his body and the horn was kind of sticking out of the water, where crocodiles would come in. And if you don't know this about a crocodile, so they can't tear.
Right.
They have to turn over to tear. Yeah. And so there were like 8 or 9 of them swimming around. I mean, giant crocodiles, of different sizes, swimming around this, and they would come in and they would go underwater and they would flip over so their feet would come out of the water, and they would come up and they would just go like this with the food because they can't swallow underwater. Yeah. So they have to come up and then chew and swallow. And we sat there for hours.
Oh, I can imagine.
I
I would
probably
have too.
4,000 photographs just of that.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are so many beautiful things in Africa,
Yeah.
not just crocodiles eating. But I mean, I was as close as I am to you to a massive crocodile.
Wow.
I mean, we had this one crocodile that he would go down, and every time he came up like this, he was 2 feet closer to our boat.
Yeah.
And he was closer and closer and closer. And finally, my friend Cindy, who was with us, who lives here, Cindy Reeves, she
Oh, yeah.
shops at Action Camera.
She's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, she's awesome. She said, you better bring your feet in. Yes, his toes were hanging out of the boat because he was in flip-flops.
Yeah.
One of the guests, because that crocodile was less than 2 feet on the side of the boat.
Wow.
So, and they unlike a lion, they can look at you and they see you as prey.
Right.
They don't look at you like a lion does. Lion looks at you like, that's really interesting. I think I'll just keep walking on.
Yeah.
But
They
a
see food.
crocodile will see you as food.
Yeah.
So yes,
What a cool experience.
it is cool.
How I know that you've mentioned the 19,000 photos you have to go through. How important is post processing in your work? How much or how little do you do? And is it, I mean, obviously it's probably dependent on the photograph, right? But what what in that regard is important to you when you're going through your images?
I think post processing is important, and I do think that I try not to. I look at professional photographers' work on social media, but I don't like to I don't like to post a lot.
Yeah.
In large part because I don't think my work is good enough. But that I think is my own inadequacies, is thinking that my work isn't good enough.
Yeah.
But I do know that the work that I'm seeing from these professional photographers has probably had a lot of touch up. And
Yeah.
that's one
Yeah.
reason why it's so beautiful.
Well, and a photographer is going to show you their best work. They're never going to show you the.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I'm really about just, hey guys, this is what I got this week.
Yeah. Which is great. I mean, I think focusing too much on the comparisons can be detrimental to the passion of your photography. I mean, anything you do. But
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like I just look for those images that are kind of special to me and capture the moment and just throw those up there with as little processing as possible.
yeah, love it.
So
What's your favorite photo you've taken?
I captured a really beautiful shot with him looking straight into the tules, into the reeds,
Yeah.
looking for something to eat.
Yeah.
And that picture I liked. And then I think so far, one of the photographs that I really love from our Botswana trip, we had a moment with, on the Chobe River where like 100 elephants came down, and not all at one time. There were like 30 at a time, and then some would leave and some would come down.
Sure.
But there was a mom and a baby,
Oh.
a tiny baby.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was the baby's first foray into the water, but it was acting like it had never seen the water before, and it was frolicking around on its back, in its mom's legs, and its trunk was coming up, and they can't really, but water's spurting out, and it's just rolling around on its back and playing and like flopping over like a dog. And I think I took 1,000 photographs of that morning.
cool is
Just
that? Yeah.
I mean, there were lines of mature elephants drinking, and yet everybody was focused on the baby. And there was another baby too, so there were two.
Yeah.
So we were focused on the
What an
baby.
incredible moment.
It was wonderful. I mean, there was so much joy in that baby elephant that you couldn't take your lens off of them.
Right.
You just couldn't.
If you were, let's say somebody approached you and wanted to get into photography, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think, obviously I would say you need to talk to a professional down at Action Camera, but I think you need to really do some soul searching on what you want to invest your time and money in.
Yeah.
Because street photography, architecture, people, landscapes, wildlife, your family, portraits, all of those subjects are as equally as interesting, but probably some of them are more so to an individual than to another.
Right.
I think you just have to identify with what resonates with your soul and what gives you pleasure.
Yeah.
And then buy the equipment that will get that job done.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, but you have a job, I have a job. So this has to be something I do on my free time.
Yeah.
And I have invested in wildlife because that's what brings me joy.
Yeah.
And the kind of equipment that I have is not the kind of equipment a person who specializes in architecture and street photography would want to have.
Sure.
So
yeah.
it's really about identifying with those subjects that give you inner peace.
Yeah.
And address your passion and go from there.
Yeah. I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts before we end this today?
I would add that, you know, the beauty of social media and the beauty of action camera together, having a place that photographers can assimilate to, take classes from, meet new photographers from. That's why I met Lisa.
Yeah.
One of these days I'm going to go on our Alaska trip.
Yeah.
But I think just having that feedback, being able to post, action camera, your photos and getting feedback from fellow photographers. You might not know them. In fact, most of the ones you don't know.
Sure.
But what you have built in action camera and what social media has enabled with the ability to post photos is that connected sense of appreciation for each other's work.
Yeah.
And the commentary,
Yeah.
Putting out questions. Hey, how do I do this? I mean, I read I think last week, somebody said, how does anybody get a bird in flight in focus? And somebody responded, do you have pre-capture?
Yeah.
So I think it's really rewarding and fulfilling to share your work.
Yeah.
Not with just you, on your website and on your social media page, but with the Birding Nevada and other photography websites. But it's that community that you've created by being here.
Yeah.
And that I'm grateful for.
Oh.
So thank you.
No, thank you. I've really enjoyed talking to you today.
My pleasure.
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah.
So thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. That's it.
All right.